Money FM 89.3, the best of the afternoon update.
Welcome to Industry Insight. Now, this is a segment where we look at various industries and dive into the forces shaping business and the economy across Asia. I'm Lynlee, and today we're exploring how escalating geopolitical flashpoints from the Middle East conflict and rising US-China trade tensions to mounting instability in critical shipping lanes are amplifying the effects of a global economic slowdown. According to KPMG's latest global economic outlook, this mix of political and economic uncertainty is prompting business leaders to hit pause on major decisions, reevaluate risk exposure, and prepare for prolonged volatility. With sectors like infrastructure, healthcare, and manufacturing sitting at the center of policy, trade, and investment flows, understanding how they're adapting has never been more vital. So joining us to break it all down is Chris Roberts, partner for infrastructure, government and healthcare and manufacturing, tax at KPMG in Singapore. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lynlee.
Great to have you on the show. Now, Chris, first off, KPMG has projected global growth to slow to levels not seen since the global financial crisis. From where you sit, how are these macro trends being felt in the real economy here in Singapore?
Yes, I think, Lynlee, what it's meaning is businesses, as you said in the introduction, are taking some time to consider, what do they do and how do they respond. I think the issue we have today is we've got so many different changes happening kind of seemingly all at the same time, whether it's trade tensions, whether it's, tariffs, whether it's conflicts, interest rate rises, when there was an expectation, if you went back, 12, 18 months, the interest rates would be coming down. So there's kind of a plethora of different issues hitting businesses. And, what we're seeing businesses try to do is to understand, what is the impact of all of these things on their operations in the region and locally, and how should they respond to that and in what way, and also, what decisions, do they make in the short term, the medium term, and the long term? Because I think, really, it's very easy to kind of jump to a particular response, but that might not be the right response in the medium term or the long term, but might, solve a problem today. So I think there are a number of challenges, and, the challenge for business leaders is how do they make sure their businesses are resilient and can adapt, in real time to these changes.
So what's the sentiment in perhaps the infrastructure or manufacturing sectors?
Yes, I think the sentiment at the moment is one of, I would say, worry somewhat, but it's more around, how do we deal with changes that seemingly, happen overnight? So whether that's policy announcements by particular governments, whether it's, conflicts, how do businesses make sure that they can adapt and respond and understand what the impacts are on their businesses? So if I take, for example, trade policy and tariffs as a particular issue, businesses, I think, are struggling today to understand and get visibility over their supply chains and what the potential impact of tariffs might be. So we're helping a lot of businesses from a customs and trade perspective really drill down into the supply chain to understand what the financial implications might be of a particular tariff outcome. And then they can make decisions around, well, what does that mean for our business? Do we maintain those suppliers? Do we look for new suppliers? Do we look for new markets? Or do we invest somewhere else? And they're more longer-term decisions, which, have a whole range of different impacts for the business. So, getting visibility, I think, is the key thing the key thing we're helping businesses in Singapore with at the moment.
Okay. So looking at the KPMG report, there seems to be a pause and prepare mindset. In your conversations with clients in the IGH or manufacturing space, is there a noticeable pullback on investment or project execution?
Yes, there is. I think it's not a situation where we're seeing things being cancelled, but we're seeing decisions taking, a lot longer than they may have done, 12, 18 months, 2 years ago as we came out of the pandemic. So what businesses are saying, is it the right time to invest now? We know we need to invest. So if I take, for example, digitization and AI, nearly every business is grappling with how do we utilize AI within the organization? What do we need to invest to digitize our business? And that's being done kind of, I guess, was a trend that was happening before recent trade conflict announcements or recent actual conflict announcements. These are challenges that businesses are being faced with. And the challenge today is because you have these other things going on, is, well, what do you fund? Because, the money tree kind of isn't unlimited. So, where am I going to get the best bang for my buck? What is going to help me weather the storm or various storms that are happening at the moment? And then how do I make sure that for the long term my business is sustainable and can grow? So businesses are taking longer to make those decisions, but they're collecting more data. They're trying to understand, the impact of trade, the impact of, conflicts, logistics, costs, interest rates, bringing all of that data together to make sure that they make an informed decision. So I'm in Amsterdam at the moment, our European Tax Summit, and, I've had a number of conversations with clients over the past few days. They still want to make investments, in the region. They see Asia, as a growth market. But what they're doing is they're kind of looking at more data points into that conversation. They're looking at support that governments can provide, training, whether that's direct support in terms of grants, funding, anything to kind of help them hedge, the risk of those investments. So there's still activity, there's still money out there that businesses want to invest in. They need to grow because, that's how, we all get better off. But the decisions are taking longer, but they're certainly not cancelled.
Now, everyone knows this conflict in the Middle East, and we've seen renewed volatility in global energy markets and mounting concerns over disruptions in key shipping lanes. So how is this affecting project costs and investment confidence, especially in infrastructure or logistics-heavy sectors?
Yeah, so I mean, it's how do you price that into the model? So, infrastructure as an example, it's a long-term investment. So you're looking at a time horizon of, 50 years maybe on some projects. If you look across a period of 50 years, you'd have years of instability, you'd have years of stability. I guess the issue today is I'm about to make this investment in whether it's a port complex, whether it's renewable energy, what is the regulatory environment going to be like? What am I being promised by governments today in terms of regulatory environment? How do I kind of factor into the model the tax policy, the uncertainty around availability of raw materials, etc. I guess it's producing more volatility in those models and more, I guess as we said before, around pausing and reflecting on, is now the right time, or do we wait and see how things play out over the next few years? But decisions will still need to be made. Think about, again, AI infrastructure. There's huge pressure on governments to invest across the world in AI infrastructure. That's not going to go away. And I think businesses and governments realise that if we don't invest, in the medium term, not just the long term, but in the medium term, we're going to put ourselves at a disadvantage. So these are critical things that they need to invest in. There's just a question mark around, how do those things get funded? And what risks do we consider when we're looking at that?
So you're saying companies, business leaders are, hitting the pause button and taking a longer time to make decisions. Are firms in Singapore taking a more cautious stance as well because of all these uncertainties? Or are they finding some ways to pivot strategically?
I think there's a bit of both. I mean, I wouldn't say that Singapore businesses are more conservative than other businesses in other parts of the world that I deal with. So I deal with clients, that are all over the world, the US or European businesses, given, my background from our UK firms. So I think we're not an outlier in Singapore, but business leaders, are looking at new opportunities, new markets, new sourcing. So if I look at the supply side, we're working with a number of businesses who are looking to assess the risks within their supply chain, whether that's tariff risks, whether it's questions around sustainability within the supply chain, or whether that's just diversifying the supply chain, away from the one or two particular territories that they've been relying on, and does that make them more resilient to be able to respond to some of these issues? On the demand side, we're helping clients to expand internationally into new markets that they may not have been before, taking advantage of demographic changes and trends. So there's obviously an aging population. Kind of, it's more pronounced in the West. Asia is younger. Africa presents a great opportunity for businesses because of demographics in Africa. So businesses are looking outward more, rather than just looking to, the traditional markets that they may have done in the past.
Interesting. Now, let's dive deeper into that, bringing in trade and tax. With new U.S. tariffs and increased fragmentation in global trade, how are companies adjusting the cross-border structures or regional supply chains?
Yeah, so talk a bit about trade and customs. So companies are trying to get visibility on their supply chain, visibility on the customs costs that might be embedded within their sourcing and in their end markets. That is an easier thing to say than to actually do in practice, because tariffs weren't an issue, or I guess were less of an issue going back a few years. So, businesses, in terms of who's responsible for tariffs within the organisation, is it even somebody in the organisation that's responsible for tariffs, or is it a third party, logistics provider? What controls have you got over that and visibility over that? So, if you're a trade and customs specialist, I don't think you've ever been anything more popular than you've been before. I know certainly I'm a tax partner, so, people are interested knowing what I do, whereas I think previously it was just kind of, no, you're a tax guy, don't really understand what that is, whereas I'm getting a lot more questions from, not just businesses, but friends and colleagues and family around, what is the impact of all of these things. I think from a structural funding perspective, the other thing that we've got going on in the international tax environment at the moment is Pillar 2, which is global minimum tax. So this is looking to ensure that the largest companies pay a minimum tax of 15%. That's driving companies to reassess their international tax structures in light of regulatory change, whether that's locally in Singapore or globally because of changes just around the world, and also the increasingly publicisation is the wrong word, but visibility being forced on companies to publish their country by country reporting. Where do they pay tax? How much do they pay tax? And all of that drives companies to kind of reassess what are they doing? Are their structures sustainable? Do they align with the group's company values? Are they comfortable with the level of risk? That test of if you read about this in the newspaper, would you be happy with it? So companies are constantly reassessing what they do, not to minimise tax, not to pay the least possible, but to pay the right amount of tax, and the amount of tax that is consistent with how and where the business operates, rather than perhaps using tax havens, for example, in the past. They're looking to very much more align substance with tax, which is ultimately more sustainable and will give them a better footing, or I guess it's something to tick off if you can make that a more sustainable tax structure from a risk perspective for the business going forward.
Well, Chris, sounds like a terribly challenging business landscape, to be honest. In manufacturing in Asia...
It's exciting. I guess, to be a tax advisor, I'm not sure I've said that in my career very often.
Okay, let's talk about manufacturing in Asia. Now, that has faced its own set of shocks. Are you seeing clients respond with perhaps automation, new trade partnerships, or even a rethink of production hubs?
Yes, we're certainly seeing clients look at a rethink of production hubs. So, we manufacture in country A for, this particular market or that particular market. Is that sustainable going forward in the context of, tariff policy, in the context of other particular geopolitical issues? So we're seeing companies kind of looking to diversify where they manufacture, how they manufacture, whether they take manufacturing back in-house, whether they co-source with a third party, whether they completely outsource manufacturing to kind of take some of the risk off their balance sheet. So, we're working with a number of businesses that are looking at, comparing country A with country B with country C, for particular markets. These are, more medium, longer term decisions. We're not seeing them kind of jump, because of a particular issue that came up in the last 2 months. To say, well, we have to stop manufacturing there and start manufacturing there. But we are seeing companies assess kind of how do they manage their manufacturing footprint. And I guess from an organisational perspective, where the value in what they do, so is it more around their business key strength is the research and development, it's the, it's logistics or whatever it might be. so is manufacturing a key part of what we do, or is that something we should outsource to a partner and work with more partners to do that?
Okay.
So we're certainly seeing that as a trend across the region.
Okay. Chris, we're running out of time, but before we let you go, KPMG has suggested businesses view geopolitical risk as a strategic asset, not just a threat. What does that look like in practice for the sectors you work with?
I think, obviously there are risks out there, but there are also, opportunities. There are opportunities to take a fresh look, at your business, identify, make it more resilient, more adaptable to these changes. There are opportunities to look at new markets, to create new partnerships with, suppliers, with customers, all the way across the world. So I think, what it's doing is make people look outward, away from kind of what they've been doing traditionally and markets they've been servicing traditionally and suppliers traditionally, and seeing kind of what's out there in the world. And all of that presents, I think, a great opportunity, particularly for, Singapore and where we are, because it's a place that's always looked outwards. And this presents, a great opportunity for it to continue to do that and build and grow from its strengths.
Okay. Chris, we're going to have to leave it there. Appreciate your insights and your time today. Fascinating conversation. He is Chris Roberts, partner for IGH and manufacturing tax at KPMG Singapore. From tariffs to trade pivots, it's clear the outlook for 2025 is challenging, but not without opportunity. You've been listening to Industry Insight on Money FM 89.3. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.